I don't think there is more data here that's not available. So, counter to what you're saying, if you ask practicing virologists, what do they think? They think this was natural origin. And that's
So
the data.
so when the scientist that Christian Anderson, February 4th, 2020 says, quote, "I think the main thing still in my mind is that the lab escape version of this is so friggin' likely to have happened because they were already doing this type of work and the molecular data is fully consistent with that scenario," that person was just deluded.
No, that's Christian Anderson, who's anything but deluded.
Okay, so what was he on about? What was he talking about?
Well,
if none of these things are true, why did he say that?
That was a process in evolution. Andrew, that's a beautiful snapshot of how science works.
Okay.
The group of experts that gathered on February 1st, 2020, and I listened in, although I didn't have much to contribute, were looking with this hypothesis, is this virus human engineered? Let's assume that's the answer, and let's see whether the data supports it. That's how you do science. You make a hypothesis, and then you try to see, can you support it or shoot it down? And the early days of that conversation, there were things that worried the virologists, and Christian is talking about that. Some features of this don't look like they're the source of natural development.
So what features did look like that you say were subsequently not? Like, what did they see then that they suddenly realized they didn't see a few days later?
The furin cleavage site was certainly a considerable part of the focus. There was initially, it got buried into technical stuff, a sequence of 6 bases in DNA that looked like a restriction site, which is what somebody might have used if they were trying to paste pieces of DNA together. And ultimately, looking back on that, that was not supportable. It was things like that, little bits and pieces of information. Everybody trying to say, okay, what's weird about this virus that makes it look like it didn't happen naturally? Let's catalog all of those. And early on, again, I'm an observer, not the expert here. I'm watching the way in which, even in that phone call on February 1st, things bounced around. And at the beginning of the call, I think most people are like, oh, this really looks like it could very well be human engineered. Towards the end of the call, well, a lot less sure about that. But this is what happened then. Over the course of that next week, with intense back and forth that I was not part of, but some of the emails have been captured, people tried to figure out what is the truth here. Not what do I want to be the truth, what is the truth? And they were fully prepared, the way this started, to say, tagged on it, this is human engineered, this is a disaster for our planet. But ultimately, that was not the answer they came to.
Let me quote you another email. But of the emails you say, I have yet to see any that has a similarly declarative statement as, oh, I see where I got that wrong. Oh, obviously the furin cleavage site could have developed naturally. I haven't found any of those emails. And maybe I haven't looked hard enough. Maybe these other people haven't looked hard enough. But if you would expect somebody somewhere to say something like, oh, I was wrong. I'm sorry. I got that wrong. Here's the other thing, the reason why one is concerned. In February, they're having a dialogue about this. And this guy, Anderson, is having a conversation with a man called Rambo. Not Rambo. But, and here's what he says. He says, quote, "Given the shit show that would happen if anyone seriously accused the Chinese of even accidental release, my feeling is we should say that given there's no evidence of a specifically engineered virus, we cannot possibly distinguish between natural evolution and escape, so we're content with ascribing it to natural process." Right? So, and Anderson says, yeah, I totally agree. That's a very reasonable conclusion, although I hate when politics is injected into science. But it's impossible not to, given the circumstances. What politics is he talking about?
Are you kidding me? That would not have been apparent to anybody in 2020, early days. Already there were lots of rumors and finger pointing going on that Chinese must have started this and maybe even did it on purpose. That was not a hard thing to find.
So the scientists are trying to rebut a political question, not a scientific one.
I don't think they're trying to rebut it. I think they're incredibly aware of just how much of that kind of noise is out there and not wanting inadvertently to contribute to it.
Why not? Why not say we don't know? And in fact, lots of this stuff looks fishy. Why would not a scientist that, as they say, they can't really tell, why didn't they just say, well, we don't know yet?
Because, again, I think we're muddying up two questions.
See, I think what you've actually, I mean, here's what I think they were already believing that somehow there were some ugly right-wing forces out there. We're going to try and blame it on China. We have Trump in power. Therefore, we must, as scientists, do everything we can to prevent that political element. And that's where the trust begins to come apart, because I don't, personally, I want the scientists just to tell me the science. If they had just said what they said, we don't know. We think these are the reasons it could be, these are the reasons it couldn't be, we don't know. But we're looking at it, and we're going to continue to look at it.
Andrew, you're misrepresenting their view. I'm sorry.
I'm just quoting from them.
Yeah. Well, of course. And let's be clear, some of those emails are not particularly well constructed in terms of...
Well, they never are we?
Right.
When we're in private, we say all sorts of things.
We say all sorts of things. We're human beings.
I'm not putting him on trial. I'm just trying to answer these questions. What did he mean? Now, if you are defending, if you are scientists worried about politics, haven't you already begun to slip?